Welcome to the Savvy Surgical Technologist. I'm your host, John Budd. Welcome back, guys. I'm so excited to have you guys back, and I'm excited to talk to you guys because I know I haven't talked to you guys in a little while. And what I want to talk to you guys about today is we're going to continue to walk down memory lane, and we're going to talk about how I got to this point in my life. I'm going to talk about how I started in healthcare. I'm also going to answer a couple of questions that people posed to me about my last episode, and I'll do that at the end. The name and the title of this podcast, this particular episode is "A Good Guy in a Bad Place," because over the years I remember always thinking that I wasn't as good as I could have been because of the activities that I was doing. I was drinking too much, I was partying too much, I was running the streets, and it really messed with my mental health. It really contributed to me going down the rabbit hole of mental health, because when you look at yourself with self-loathing, it wasn't so much a self-loathing, it was just a lot of disappointment over the years. Like I told you guys about how I was sending out messages and stuff like that, you know and a lot of times in our lives we'll look at some of the things that we do and we'll make that into our whole life, and really that's not the truth of who we are. We're so much more than that. And as I've grown and as I've embraced who I am and subscribe to more self love, I started to really look down the paths of my life and down through the years, and I've seen all the things and the positive impacts that I've had on people. And I've started to embrace that more. But for years, I would always think that I wasn't living up to um, my own personal standards. I was just doing things that I wasn't proud of. But I kind of forgot about all of the good things that I did and all of the contributions I made to other people's lives and stuff. And I remember people will always be like, yo, you too hard on yourself. You're really, you're a good person. You're a good person and stuff. But I couldn't really grasp that because I knew that I was doing some things in the background that I wasn't proud of. So I'm happy to be on the other side of that. And I'm happy to share the journey with you guys to show you some of the things that I've done and some of the lives that I've impacted. So I'm gonna take you back through the years, and I'm gonna take you back back to the inside, where I really realized a lot of the things that I would go through later on in life, whether good or bad, were impacted or influenced by the things that went on inside the penitentiary. So I remember for years. I remember when I was there. I told you guys how much I hated the food and all that stuff, and how much I didn't eat it initially when I first got there. But over time, of course, I had to eat it. I had no choice. But I also remember that I gave my food away a lot, because what people don't really understand is so there's haves and haves nots. Just like, again, everything that's inside something, like inside the penitentiary, is a microcosm of what goes on in real life. Just like in healthcare is a microcosm of what goes on in real life. So during my time on the inside, I would be around people who were extremely poor, and I didn't have much either. So I remember telling my mother, my mom didn't have much. She sacrificed some things to get me out on bail. So when I eventually had to go back in on the inside after I got convicted, I remember talking to her on the phone, and I said, I need some money or whatever, to get commissary because the food is so bad. I gotta have commissary to survive. And I said, but don't worry about it, Mom. Just send me $25, because again, I always been an earner. I always make money. I have a way with money, and I emphasized that to you guys in the last episode, that I just make money. So I knew I had a plan. So I said, Mom, send me $25, and from that $25, I'm gonna build something. So she sent me the $25, and I started what they call a store box. So what I would do is I would give people cigarettes or food, potato chips, oodles and noodles. I forget, was it oodles and noodles back then? Whatever it was, I had built up a store box. So I had all these items, toothbrushes, toothpaste, and I would sell them at the end of the month. And at the end of the month, when people got their money, I would I would get paid. I would get paid double. Like, they would give me 2 packs of cigarettes. I didn't smoke, so the cigarettes was a really hefty thing on my my tallies. So, but I actually when I ended up state, and I'll tell you guys about more about that story in the future. But I actually got caught and got transferred from one prison to another prison because they accused me of running a illegal store box, which I was. But what they didn't know is that although I was making money and I survived off that, and I was doing well off of it, I wasn't doing as well as I could have been doing because I was giving a lot of stuff away. I was giving a lot of stuff away because the people, they just couldn't afford to pay me. They couldn't afford to run it back. So I always have this sense of kindness about me, and I never like to see people struggle. Even to this day, I do a lot. You guys know that I have a store and stuff, and I give a lot of my revenue to worthy causes. And it was the same way when I was on the inside. So when people would come back to pay me back, they would say they didn't have it, and I would accept it because the goal for me was really to just keep myself with some kind of food besides the food that I had to eat. So I didn't really mind giving back, but that's just a microcosm of how I am as a person, and I always try to be good to people. So despite all the struggles that I had in there and all the noise, and it was always so loud, always so cold, overstimulating. But one of the stories that really stand out in my mind is I remember one of the things that I really loved the most was they would after they put us in the dorms all day and we freezing to death, they would eventually open our cells back up and they would let us in. It was after dinner until about, I guess, 8 or 9 o'clock, and I loved that time because it was so much warmer in our individual cell. And for a little while there, I was in my cell by myself, which was amazing because the place was overcrowded. I don't know if they just simply forgot about me, but it was a blessing for sure. So I was inside. I was in my room, and I always would read a lot. I would read a lot. So, and again, in future episodes, I'll tell you about how I was upstate and how I became a hero in upstate. And it's a true story. But anyway, while I was inside in the county and I would be in my cell before lights out, I would always love to read because I always felt like reading gave me my freedom, because when you read, you don't have to be where you are. You can fly off. Your imagination takes you to wherever that book is taking you. And that was that was one of the ways that I became free while I was on the inside. So anyway, I eventually got this roommate, and this guy was really big and mean, and he wasn't really mean to me, but he was very standoffish, and he had a lot of confrontations on the dorm when we was on the dorm side. But when we were in the cell, he was cool. Like, we would talk, and we always had nice conversations. I remember when I first seen him, I was like, man, this guy's big. How am I handle this guy if he try to act up or whatever? And I already had a plan. I knew what I was going to do or whatever if he came at me like that, which never happened. And fortunately for me, none of those type of incidents ever happened to me on the inside. Again, grateful for who I am. My energy always precedes me. So for some reason, I became a star. Every setting that I'm in, I somehow elevate and I become really popular. Even when I was on the inside, I became a popular leader or whatever. And I think it's because of my kindness, and my energy precedes me. But anyway, during our nights, we would talk and stuff, and I would read to him a little bit because he would always ask me why I was reading, and I told him about how it made me feel free or whatever. So sometimes I would read the stories or what I was reading at that particular time. But I never forget that late at night around, and again, this guy was huge, but I remember he had the top bunk, I had the bottom bunk, and I remember I would hear noise, like crying noises in the middle of the night. This would go on for months and months and stuff. And like, he would just be crying every night softly, like trying to, muffle it or whatever. But I would hear it. I mean, there's no space in there or whatever. And I remember right before I was about to be transferred upstate, me and him was talking outside, and we was laughing and just talking about something. And then he asked me, like, he just got really serious, and he said, "Oh my God, these pictures." But he got a really serious look on his face, and he asked me if I heard him at night. And I looked at him and I said, "What you talking about?" And he said, did you ever hear me when I was crying at night?" And it took a lot for him to do that, I'm sure, because we're in prison. You got to have a certain demeanor. You have to have a certain way about you. But I think we established our friendship over the little bit of time we were together. And so he asked me that question with a serious, like, he needed to know. And I say, yeah, I heard you. And he's like, really? I said, yeah, I would hear you every night or whatever. And I knew you was trying to muffle it and all that, but I could hear you. And he said, why, how come you never clowned me over it? Because in prison, it was the bid. Everybody clowned everybody over something. It's just the way you pass time that we would always pick on each other. It was sort of like high school, but with grown men, and grown, nasty, evil men at that, because sometimes it would get really bad. I've seen some violent things or whatever, but he asked me why I never clowned him. And I said, because I was crying too. And he looked at me, he was like, what? I said, yeah, because I was crying too. What people don't understand is that when you go through life, we all have opportunities where we could hurt people's feelings, or we could belittle somebody, or we could chastise somebody. But we should always take the high road. We should always choose kindness. So even when I was on the inside, I was crying too. I was suffering too. I wasn't physically crying, because back then I never cried. I didn't start crying until recently. And I'm happy that I let those emotions out now. But back then I never cried, but I cried on the inside. So I would hear him every night crying, but I never took those opportunities to clown him over it, because it's not a. We go through so much there. We went through so much. So I always wanted to be a good person. So again, in future podcasts, I'll take you guys through all the things that I seen and all the things that I actually did on the inside to survive and to get out of there with a modicum of my self-respect and some dignity. And a lot of that hinged on how kind I was to people. So, my message to you guys is to always be kind. Like, even on my workplace, even in like I told you guys in the last episode, I won a lot of awards. I did a lot of things. Man, I could tell y'all so many stories about like how I would be out at a mall or something, and I would see somebody. I worked on labor and delivery at Abington. Shout out to everybody in labor and delivery at Abington. You guys made me who I am today. They sent me to school to be a scrub tech, so I'm very grateful for what went on at Abington. I have a lot of great memories, but I remember one time I was in Willow Grove Mall, and I was walking through a store, and this lady, it was two of them, they were going through some dresses or something. They must have seen me walking by, and they was like, "Hey, don't you work at labor at Abington Labor?" And I said, "Yeah, I do." And they said, "You helped deliver my baby, and I'm forever grateful for you for that." So it's a lot of things that went on through the course of my life that pointed me to the direction, because no matter what I was going through emotionally and spiritually, I always try to be a good person. I always try to be a kind-hearted person. And that's why I say I won a lot of awards. I won a lot of good things. I have a lot of good friends in healthcare, and a lot of times the things that I didn't have, a lot of the things that I destroyed, it was because I was under the influences at that time. But when I was at work, I was always on my P's and Q's. I always wanted to give them my best. And when I did make mistakes at work, I would try to be accountable. I would make the proper apologies and stuff like that. So what I want, my message to you guys is that if we plant good seeds and we don't tear those seeds up every 5 minutes to see if they're growing, and we water it and we nurture it in a positive and kind-hearted way, that eventually you'll have things that's worth building. You'll grow things that you could build your life on and have a good foundation. So try to plant good seeds and continue to water it and grow it, because over time you'll benefit from that. So while I was in the inside, I was very kind-hearted and very generous. And when things went left, when somebody was picking on me or trying to pick on me, because I wasn't really somebody to fuck around with, I would handle my business. But I never went into those places with an attitude or with hurtful intent. So, moving forward in time, when I got home and I came home from the penitentiary, I needed a job, and I didn't have many options because, again, I was a convicted felon, multiple convicted felon. So I remember when I had got an opportunity to get in the hospital. So my aunt's best friend, she was the nurse director at Osteopathic Hospital on City Line Avenue in Philadelphia, and my aunt had got me an opportunity. I think it was with me, Ted Moose Campbell. Shout out to Ted Moose Campbell. I think it was Ted and my cousin Andre to go Fleming, who interviewed with me. I think me and Ted Ted got the job, but Ted quit after about a week. He didn't make it, and I don't blame him because I barely made it. And Andre didn't get the job, but he landed on his feet because he ended up in D.C. and he was a police officer for the last 30 years as an inspector in the D.C. Police Department. He just recently retired. So shout out to my cousin Andre. So proud of you and so happy for you. So remember, guys, that sometimes in life when things don't go as well as you think they should, when you don't get something, it may be God, source spirit is redirecting you to something better. So don't ever get discouraged. Continue to try to push forward because what's meant for you is going to come to you. Just be patient and be diligent and do the work to get to the things that you want to get to. So shout out again to Andre. And Ted Moose Campbell handled his business too. He has a beautiful home now in Delaware. I'm so proud of him. Proud to call him my friend. So shout out to both of them. But I had got the job and I'll never forget this because my first day, man, it was just crazy. It was crazy because um, I was completely overwhelmed. I remember I was on 2 West and I had got hired for 11 to 7, but I had to orient and train on day shift. So while I was training, I remember that my very first day and my very first call bell response. This guy, he must have he had total knee surgery because I remember I walked into the room to answer the call bell and he was in the room and he was in his bed. He was huge. He was like 400 pounds easy. And I'm little. I'm little now and I was really small back then. I think I might have been 125, 30 pounds coming out of jail or whatever. But, you know, I was pretty muscular because I lifted a lot of weights while I was in there. But I was still small. And this guy, he was in traction and I've never seen anything like it. And I remember seeing his scar, which is really weird to me now because I'm wondering, like, now that I know so much more, like, where was his bandages at? But I remember seeing the long scar down his knee and it was so red and swollen and he had staples in it. And I looked at it and I was like, oh, you know, and he told me that he needed the bedpan. And I was like, oh, shit. Okay. So I got him the bedpan, but he was so big, I couldn't get him on the bedpan. He was trying to lift himself up and he helped a little bit, but I couldn't get him on as comfortably. So I had to call the nurse and the nurse came in and helped me. So we eventually got him on the bedpan and I left. And I remember it took a little while, but he called me back and I went back in and for some reason, ironically, the nurse couldn't be found. And again, I was new there, so I didn't really know what I was doing. But I had to get him off the bedpan by myself. So like eventually I got him off, and when I got him off, I'll never forget this because the stool was overflowing the bedpan. It was spilling on the side. It was spilling down his bed. Like it was on the floor, and the smell was so horrific that I was gagging. But I was very mindful. Like I said, I was always tried to be a kind-hearted person for the most part. And what happened is I was trying not to gag. And I was trying not to throw up because I was literally getting sick. Again, you know, it was my very first day. It was my first call bell. It was early in the morning. And I didn't want to embarrass this guy. I didn't want to hurt his feelings because he was already going through enough, you know, and I'm a big believer in compassion and kindness. And if you guys know me, that one of my mottos is kindness is cool. But anyway, I eventually got the bedpan back to the bathroom and I flushed it and I cleaned it out or whatever. And all this is why I'm really getting sick. So I ultimately had to go back into the room and I cleaned him up and I'm kind of laughing with him, bantering with him, you know, putting him at ease because he was embarrassed and stuff, as we all would be. And again, I didn't want him to feel that way. And me being new, I didn't really know how to navigate it. So I just fell back on instincts to just be a kind-hearted person and treat him how I want to be treated. So I eventually got him cleaned up and stuff. And I left or whatever. And I think he eventually wrote a letter about me. On my very first day, I got a letter of recommendation of kindness or whatever. But he didn't know that I struggled really hard, not only with that incident, but that whole day was just a really bad day for me. And that's why I said I understand why Ted quit, because I eventually went home and I'll never forget this. I went home. I was living with my mother on Rittenhouse Street. I had just got home from prison. Didn't have a lot of options. And my mother didn't play. My mother was very about her business, you know. And looking back on it, I always say that, you know, she was a boss, but she just did not play. So I remember I remember going home and I told my mother, I said, I'm not going back there. I said, I can't do it. I can't go another minute in there. And I remember her looking at me. I think I was sitting down because she was standing over top of me. And for some reason, I feel like she was towering over me or whatever. And she told me directly, looked me directly in my eyes, as she always did. And she said, "You're getting the fuck up out of here." And I want to be authentic in this podcast. And that's why I want to tell you guys verbally what she said and the emotions that she said had behind it. She said, "You're getting the fuck up out of here. No grown man of mine is going to lay up in my house and not work. You don't have a lot of options. You're a felon. You're lucky and fortunate to have this job. You're going to go back there and you're going to give it your best shot. And if over time you find something else and you have other options, then you can do what you want. A man never quits a job." This is literally what she said. "A man never quits a job unless he has something better lined up." And I'm grateful for my mother for being, and it stung because me and her at that time, we were starting to clash. We were so much alike, and I was already down on my dark path. Like at that point, like I was starting to party and I was starting to really drink, and I guess I was trying to deal with the trauma of being on the inside or whatever the reasons were. Me and her were starting. We were on our beginning on our lone path of and where we butted heads. I loved her, and we I loved her a lot, but we went through a lot. And I remember thinking like, damn, and now that I look back, I just want to, take a moment to thank her because 30, 40 years later, whatever the time frame is, I'm still here. I built a great life off of it. I eventually came to the other side of all of the traumas that I had in my life. And it's mainly because of the mother that I had. So if she didn't send me back, I literally would have quit that job and been out there scrambling again. Probably would have ended up in prison again and whatever. But so the links of our lives, the stories, they matter. The things that go on inside our lives, they matter. And we have to acknowledge the things that we do. We have to acknowledge the people who influenced us, and we have to acknowledge the lives that we built off of all of that. So I'm grateful for the things that I've learned and the kindness that I've built my life off of over the years. Again, I'm always going to regret the things that I did that were less than honorable and less than the character that I wanted to display. But at the same time, a lot of lessons were learned, a lot of foundations were built, and I'm continuing to try to do great things because that's what I want. And I want to honor my mother and then continue to live her legacy of building something from nothing. So that's how I started in healthcare, and eventually I ended up at Abington, and I'll tell you guys a story about how I ended up going to Scrub Tech School and how they sent me there and all that type of stuff, and how, again, I eventually became who I am today. And there's so many things I want to tell you guys about, and so many stories that I want to point out, and to give you guys a feel for how I am in and outside of healthcare. So that's my story about healthcare. But, over the years, that story resonates with me because I know that I would have lost a lot of opportunities. And again, I think I would have probably ended up back in the system had I not had a mother who was firm, stern, but always fair. So, that's one of the things that I love about her. So, going forward, so what's the next thing I want to talk to you guys about? Like I told you guys, I had got a couple of questions from people. And one of the questions somebody asked me is what brings me joy inside of working in healthcare, because she hears that it's always a lot of drama and negative things going on in there inside of healthcare. And she was wondering how I behave and how I go about my business and inside of healthcare, and if I'm happy there. And the short answer is I'm very happy inside. And I told you guys in the last episode that some of my greatest moments and some of my greatest triumphs and most of my happiness was inside of healthcare, because my real life I was struggling with so much with mental health, alcoholism, and the things that challenged me every day, and lost relationships and stuff like that. I just struggled a lot in my real life. But when I was inside healthcare, I never went to work drunk. I never went to work under the influence of anything. I went to work sick because I was out partying the night before or for 3 nights before that. But I would go to work less than optimal, but I never ever had a drink. You know, I know people who did that type of stuff, and I never did that because it was against my core values of who I wanted to be. I always felt like those people came there with the expectations of getting our best, and although I didn't give them my best because sometimes I was sick, I always showed up, and I never showed up under the influence, and I'm so grateful for that. But anyway, my life inside healthcare is love. I love it. I love the friendships that I made, and I love the camaraderie that I made. I love looking back over how I went from an OB tech to a scrub tech because I always wanted to be a scrub tech. I remember meeting a man, Colin. What's up, Colin? He a good guy. I love him. He works at Penn now, and I remember meeting him at Osteopathic, and I used to work on OB, and he would do C-sections, and I remember I would look at in the C-section room. I couldn't go in there, and I would always say to myself that I wanted to be I wanted to do what he was doing, and I eventually went to Abington, and I would do the same thing with Esther Ray. Rest in peace, Esther Ray. I love you and I miss you. You influenced my life in a positive way as well. She passed away, and maybe one day I'll tell you that story about her. But she influenced me in a positive way, and I used to look in the C-section rooms at Abington, and eventually they would send me to school. But I have a lot of great memories, and a lot of happiness came through me being inside of healthcare. And the next question that someone asked me, and it was more about my life outside of healthcare, but she basically was said, and it's a valid question, I think, but she basically asked me during my struggles with dancing with my devil. She said that when she was dancing with the devil, that the devil would whisper into her heart, and that she would just close her ears. I mean, excuse me, not her heart. She would close her ears up, and that she wouldn't listen. And that's how she ultimately overcame the struggles that she faced. And she basically asked me, how come I couldn't just close my ears up and you know, basically fight him and get better years ago? And why did it take me so long to get through the challenges that I faced? And I felt it was a valid question, but people have to understand that there's levels. There's always going to be levels, and different devils for different levels. My calling is greater, and I'm not dismissing her and her calling, but I'm saying my calling is greater. So I face harder devils. I face demons. And, you know, and anybody who been down the dark paths and who danced with devils for years, they'll understand that the devil don't whisper into your ear. The devil don't whisper into your ear. He whispers into your heart. The devils that I was facing, he whispered in my heart. He made me feel like the next time would be the best time, even though I knew in my heart the last time was the worst time. So what he whispered, he knew exactly what I wanted. He knew the things that I loved, and he knew my weaknesses. So every time that he would talk to me, it was like honey in my ear. Like honey in my ear, he made me want it. You know, and I wish that it was different. I wish that it was better. But to compare her journey to my journey is different. Because if a devil whisper into your ear, then he's no true devil to me. Because the devil, he whispers into your heart. He knows you. He's closer to you than your own jugular vein. When you allow him in, his duty to get to know you, to get to know all your weaknesses, and then exploit them to use them against you. So that's why it took me 30, 40 years to get the help that I needed. Am I happy about it? Is that a great reason why? Probably not. But ultimately, the bottom line is that when you struggle with any kind of low vibrational things, you're up against an enemy who's strong. So I wish I could have clapped my hands on my ears and not listened, but he wasn't in my ears. So again, you know, going forward, as we traverse through this podcast, I hope to share a lot more things with you. I hope to share a lot more insight. Like I said, I'm going to take you down into the state penitentiary. I'm going to take you into my schooling. I'm going to take you into all the things that made me who I am today. But ultimately, all I want to do is shine light on to how we all can continue on and how we all can fight through the things that we go through and build a life that's worthy of us, build a life of honor and dignity. So the Savvy Surgical Technologist is going to touch on all of those things, you know, and I'm hoping to have next week on my first guest, and I'm excited about that because this podcast is ultimately going to be about life inside and outside of healthcare. So my main focus is what I really, really want to do is just bring a lot of different people on so you guys can hear their stories and we could talk about and banter about healthcare and life, and you guys can see what it's about. I'm looking forward to bringing a couple on. I'm bringing some surgeons on. I'm bringing people from so many different walks of lives onto this podcast to give you guys a little something to hold on to and a little insight onto what's going on inside this business. All right, cool. Keep it savvy. All right, I'll see you guys next week. Seriously.